Hello and welcome to AI Ramblings, episode 50. Yes, the big one. And you may notice something unusual if you're a regular here on the show. It's a weekday. We're going to try something new on episode 50 and forward. We're going to do a show as much as possible, not just the weekends. The weekends are to kind of take in the overall news that happened on AI land and technology over the week. We're going to try something new, 30-minute format every day if we can. AI Ramblings. And as you know, this is a show where we're really talking about technology, AI from a mainstream perspective for regular folks. We go into a lot of technical detail, but we simplify the jargon and make it relevant to what matters to us and what will matter to us, even though we're inundated nonstop with AI every day on every front in terms of how useful it is, how amazing it is going to be, etc. As a former ex-Goldman partner and internet analyst, as a professional analyst looking at tech waves for over 30 years, from the PC to the internet to mobile to social, I've kind of seen it all. And I've said regularly that everything I've done in my professional life over decades is a dress rehearsal for what's to come. But I'm not hyping AI. I think we need to be realistic about AI. Most of the things that everyone is excited about today, everything from AGI to humanoid robotics to amazing AI data centers in space and all of those things, will happen. But if experience holds, despite the exponential curves in AI, it's all going to take longer than we think. And it always does. And it will here too. So we need to separate the secular moves in technology and AI from the financial moves. And right now, the financial moves have been very volatile, not the very least, due to the war. We just saw a little bit of a ceasefire. We'll see where that goes. But that's the context here on AI Ramblings, to talk about two or three things that should matter to you more than you think and go beneath the jargon and try to make sense of it from a longer term point of view in terms of how it will really help our improve our lives in the work and home kind of context. The format here, 30 minutes. I want to talk about typically two or three things that are of note in terms of what's going on this week and why it matters to get your attention, my attention, because attention is the most valuable commodity going forward. And human attention, not computer attention. Computer attention is going to be exponentially growing, but human attention is what we're really talking about. So I want to talk about three items. Well, number one is AI basically creating from the beginning, huge amount of fear over jobs. And that's been one of the two major fears of this technology wave versus other technology waves. All the surveys show that people young to old, everything in the middle, are afraid of this technology wave, more so than they've been on every other wave. They're afraid for two reasons. One, because of the sci-fi driven existential AGI fears, that dystopian views that AI is going to take over the world when it becomes sentient, etc. We are far away from that, from my perspective, and I can give you technical reasons for that. That's not a faith or a hope-based statement. The technical realities of AI, the way even what remarkable things they're doing today, are nowhere close. We are barely started in terms of AI. And a lot of very prominent AI scientists, Jan LeCun, Andre Karpathy, a lot of people are saying this and giving the data to back it up. So AGI, despite all the hype, is hype. So I wanted to just highlight that. So the existential fear of AI, I think, is overdone. The second fear has been AI in jobs. And I've written about it from the very first post here on my Substack AI Reset to Zero, because AI is resetting everything we do in our lives with and around technology. But the job sphere too, I think, is overdone. We're going to see over time, we're going to see more jobs created, not less. And there's a lot of data near term where the job losses are concerning. Oracle just cut tens of thousands of jobs. You saw your Block cut some jobs. There is a little tendency, a lot of technology companies who may have overhired during COVID and a lot of other things, crypto waves, etc., are taking advantage of the AI cover, as it were, to cut jobs, and investors are rewarding these companies by taking up their stock prices because they're lowering costs. But guess what? Most of them are going to probably have to hire back people because once the compute is available, AI compute, one of the topics we're going to talk about, people are a lot more capable, more able, not just developers, everybody, and it's going to allow companies to do a lot more things than they've ever been able to do. And we've seen this in every tech cycle. It's going to happen here faster than not, but it's going to be volatile in the middle. The reason I'm bringing it up as topic number one today is there were two surveys, one from my alma mater, Goldman Sachs, one from Morgan Stanley, analyzing the job numbers and economic numbers around AI. And a lot of detail. It's in my post 1050 on my AI reset to zero, AI-RTZ 1050. And you can look at the numbers with the links. But I'll give you the spoiler alert. The numbers are showing net improvement in jobs, not huge, fractions of a percentage, but in the right direction. And that is consistent with other things we've seen in recent other surveys and so on. So the data is starting to back all this, even though week to week we're going to see sensational numbers in the media about company X and company Y letting go lots of people and so on. What they're not telling you often is they are hiring back in more cases than not. So the job fears over AI is the first item I wanted to discuss. The second item I wanted to discuss is AI models. As we know, the competition amongst the top 5 or 6 large language model providers has been fierce. Almost every week, they're constantly improving their models, releasing new capabilities. Anthropic, which was a distinct number 2 behind OpenAI only 6-8 months ago, really took almost the number one spot. In fact, in ARR revenue, it may cross OpenAI. The Pepsi is taking over Coke, as it were, as I've written about. And they did it in the last 4 or 5 months, one on the back of their core product, AI Claude Code, and then Claude Co-Work, which is a productivity app built for regular people. And that strategy is being emulated by everybody from OpenAI with Codex to Microsoft Copilot. But Anthropic, Claude, and Code and Co-Work have now crossed the 30 billion ARR mark, which puts them in a very good stead of the 3 mega IPOs planned for this year, and Anthropic being the number 3rd. If this trend continues, it puts them in actually the number 1 spot, in my view, as an analyst. No stock recommendations here. OpenAI, in fact, was so startled by all this that they literally did another reset, another code red a few weeks ago, and said, oh, we're not going to do any side quests, and we're going to focus back on the enterprise market, which is Anthropic's bread and butter. And so they're refocusing on the enterprise side. So that competition is going on. In the meantime, Elon is trying to get SpaceX IPO done by June, his birthday. And so that'll be a $2 trillion IPO. So $2 trillion there, another trillion, trillion and a half maybe between these other two. Big year in IPO in tech if they go out. And that's what all this horse racing is going on. So the big news this week is that OpenAI is making rumblings about their next big model called Spud. Anthropic with its next big model called Mythos. They just made some announcements yesterday. They're saying Mythos is so powerful that there are cybersecurity concerns. So we're not going to release it out in the wild. We're going to partner with a few dozen of the responsible technology companies out there and work with them, figure it out. They've even got a security initiative called Glasswing. I've written up all of this in post number 1051 for tomorrow at AI-RTZ, so you can look at all the details. It's in the news as well, but my take on all of that. So those are the two big companies with the big model revisions. The third one that's a little under the radar is Meta, which is going to have their first model under their new head of AI, Alexander Wang, that Meta hired for $15 billion, his company. Mark Zuckerberg did that personally. And Mark Zuckerberg is one of the most focused founder CEOs I've seen. The only other one I can think about, and all the people I've worked with over 30 years, is Bill Gates. In the 90s, when he saw the internet coming, he just, threw caution to the wind and basically made sure Microsoft could win the internet. And Mark is doing the same thing. He's going to invest over 150 billion this year on infrastructure, etc. This is his big model. Even after his phenomenal success with Llama, which were the open source models up to series number 4. They basically went back to scratch, hired lots of people for collectively billions of dollars, AI research talent from Apple, from OpenAI, from everybody. And this Muse Spark model is the first one that is supposed to be pari passu with the big ones today from the big guys, OpenAI, Anthropic. We'll see how they measure up because it's not fully released. It's still going to be tested out with close partners, some API access, etc., in the weeds, which basically means for you and me, we can use Meta AI, the regular models, the Llama model versions, but hopefully in the next few weeks and months, we'll see Muse Spark. But I wanted to highlight that it's more closed than open. That's the other big twist. And over time, they will have some open elements of Muse Spark as well, and presumably some other models as well. So this is the big news. All the big guys and the wannabe big guys are really ramping in to create their biggest versions of their latest models, especially as the whole industry goes from chatbots to AI agents, because agents require huge more amounts of AI compute, and that is in short supply, and that's why everyone is really spending a lot of money, tens and hundreds of billions of dollars on gigawatt data centers to do that. And so the token compute race is the next concurrent thing that's really taking up Silicon Valley's attention. Terms like token maxing, claudonomics, which are basically who can use the most number of tokens. There's games being played amongst developers at Meta, at a lot of other companies. Who is the most productive? If Jensen Huang of NVIDIA said, hey, if I'm paying $500,000 from an engineer, he better be using, or she better be using $250,000 or more worth of AI tokens, because then it's an indication that person is being productive using AI to generate a lot more product other than just coding in the traditional way. So token maxing, tokenomics, claudonomics, these are the buzzwords you're going to hear at some cocktail parties. And all that means is tokens are basically a token is what is going to be to AI compute, what electricity was to light bulbs and today air conditioning and everything we have here. We're going to need more of it. The more we use, the more we pay. The companies are going to try and figure out how to get the cost down very efficiently. Good news, the costs are plummeting. Bad news, the supply for the tokens, which are the AI data centers, and you need lots of it. A gigawatt power data center costs $50 billion. But more importantly, it takes 2 or 3 years to get all the electrical components, etc. And that's the scarce component. And it's all been exacerbated by the global memory shortage. The war has not helped. And all of that is our key elements here that slows down the supply of AI compute, i.e. AI tokens, which means as this stuff rolls out to regular people so that we can do useful things with the agents, we are going to have to pay a little bit more for the tokens than we should. And hopefully over time, this stuff normalizes as, the AI versions of Moore's Law takes over. But that'll take 2 or 3 years. So I wanted to highlight this token maxing claudonomics component, and I've written about it a lot in my post number 1045 if you want to take a look at it. The next thing I just wanted to touch on is so we touched on the model wars, the job fears, and tokenomics. The other thing I want to do on these daily AI rambling pieces is talk about gadgets. I love gadgets, always have for 30 years. It's a great way to understand where technology is going, whether it's laptops, phones, computers, wearables, gadgets, etc. And everything we know that we've used gadget-wise is essentially being redone in a dramatic way with AI. And so every operating system, your Mac, your Windows, everything's going to get AI enabled even more dramatically than you see it today. And so talking about gadgets from not just a hardware perspective, which is what the top tech reviewers, gadget reviewers do, the MKBHDs, I'm a huge fan, Vergecast at The Verge, David Pierce, Nilay Patel, Marcus Brown. These are people, I love their shows, their podcasts. I'd recommend them. I'll put it in the show notes. But they don't talk about this from a business perspective, and that's one of the things I want to talk about in terms of gadgets every day on these AI rambling shows. And today, what I wanted to hit are foldables, smartphones. We all know regular smartphones that we've used for a long time, the iPhone 17, etc. But for the last 7 years, companies like Samsung, Google have pioneered foldables. And here is the Google's first Pixel foldable. You'll see here it's a clean, nice screen on the front, and then a 7, 8 inch screen on the inside. Here is Google's latest foldable, the 10 Fold, and same thing. It looks like a regular phone, about 6.8 inches on the outside, and then when you open it, it's 8 inches on the inside, and it gives you like a tablet type of surface. Reason all this gadgety stuff is important is because Apple is rumored to be introducing its first Fold later this year. So that's been anticipated. Everyone's been excited about it. There was just news today that they may have some production issues, and so it may be delayed a little bit. We don't know. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I've been a foldable gadget fan for a long time. They're expensive. These things typically are $1,500, $2,000 and up. Apple's is probably going to be 2,000 because they've typically got 3 screens on them, a lot of other gizmos attached. But the interesting thing, the reason I'm talking about it on this AI Rambling show, is that the thing I'm looking forward to from Apple, and this is not what comes across on most of the reviews of foldables. If you watch all the foldables, the number one foldable out there today in the US is the Samsung Galaxy 7 foldable, which I have over there. I should have brought it over. It's thinner than the Google's latest 10, and it's a very nice phone. The problem is all of these things run Android. Android belongs to Google, and Android is basically 70% of the smartphone Android market around the world. They've got a huge ecosystem of apps and developers and so on. Apple, however, their developer ecosystem makes 70 to 80% of the money, even though on a unit basis, they control maybe 25, 30% of the units on a worldwide basis. Apple's the developer support is a lot stronger and a lot richer. And so one of the things that I think is going to be most interesting is that the foldables from Apple, when they come, they should have done a lot more work because they control the whole vertical stack. They control the OS, the hardware, and all the applications and the third-party application interfaces and integrations. So they should allow for a lot more creativity in terms of using the second screen on these things beyond what the Android world with Google has done. The Android foldables typically allow you to run 2, 3, 4, 5 apps. You can do Windows like on a laptop, etc., with touch. It's interesting, but it's not life-changing or earth-shattering, etc. And I'm not saying Apple is going to do earth-shattering, life-changing things, but they've typically, when they enter the market, there were a lot of music players before the iPod came along. There were a lot of laptops before the first MacBook Air came out. There were a lot of regular laptops giving you 4 or 5 hours until the first M1 Apple Silicon laptop came out and gave us 8, 9, 10-hour battery life. So I'm optimistic that with its vertical integration, control of a global supply chain, which I've written about, despite the current memory issues globally, chip issues, Apple should be able to innovate more than its peers on the software side, and particularly with AI. They've partnered with Google's Gemini, which I think is one of the strongest AI offerings out there. With Siri, that should be out this year. So on the foldable side, I am very optimistic on the Apple Fold, as the rest of the world is, but my optimism comes from the software possibilities, which most people are not focused on. It also is important from a business point of view because, again, Apple has 70+% of the App Store economics in smartphones, which is a market that is over 500 billion units yearly, and it's actually as big, if not bigger, than the AI industry. And AI is going to get fused into it. So I wanted to bring up this gadget Apple Fold as my first topic on this daily version of AI Ramblings. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on, I do want to also take very quickly some viewer questions. A couple of things that came in from people. Number one, what did I think about the OpenAI acquisition of this podcast called TBPN? It's been nicknamed the Tech Bro Podcast Network. Two very talented people who've, with a team of 11 over 2 years, created a podcast property with 70,000 views of the who's who of Silicon Valley. OpenAI supposedly has bought it for low hundreds of millions of dollars, so big number. Look, OpenAI wants to control vertically a little bit on the media side. We'll see how that goes. The more important thing as an analyst that I'll point out, which I've not seen written about, is that this potentially acquisition is a price that's been set. If anything, stock, once it goes private to public or anything gets monetized and there's a value to it, it means almost every other podcast network, gets a revised price. And podcasts, Spotify was the first company 3, 4, 5 years ago. They started to make big investments in podcasts. Joe Rogan got hundreds of millions of dollars for his first podcast, and the rest is history in terms of his importance in the podcast world. Today, everyone has podcasts. I think the Oscars even had a podcast category, or the Emmys, or one of the big Hollywood shows had a podcast category for the first time. So podcasts are a big thing now. But now there is a value, a monetary value that is out there. And on metrics, the TBPN was 5 million in revenues reportedly last year, going to 30 million. They're going to get out of the advertising business because OpenAI is now the big sugar daddy. But in the tech world, anyway, it means, big leading tech podcasts. The big one is the All In podcast with 4, billionaires who run that show. They have 1 million followers. What is that worth in the world of TBPN, valued at, let's say, 250 million, theoretically? What is the Vergecast podcast worth? What is the Away From podcast from MKB worth? Any other financial podcasts that are out there? There are a number of them. And I'm not saying these are all going to trade, but I'm saying people are going to start to rethink the value, even if other buyers step forward or don't. But that's how the financial markets work. And now there's a bid-ask potential market here. So that's my big reaction to the TVPN OpenAI transaction. The second question I got was that I want to talk about it because it's topical, is the ceasefire in the U.S.-Iraq war. What does it mean for tech? And good thing, obviously, just like it means a good thing, hopefully, for oil, and most importantly, for not cleaning out entire civilizations. Remember, Iran, regardless of what they may have done to the U.S. over the last 30 years, this is a civilization that's one of the oldest on the planet, on par with the Chinese and the Indians and the Egyptians. I mean, thousands of years, 93 million people. When we talk about civilization ending deadlines at 8 p.m. East Coast time, I'm glad, just like everybody else, that deadline is off the table. But from a technology point of view, it means that volatility and supply shortages continue. One of the biggest issues, and I wrote about it in terms of this Hormuz closure, was actually the supply of helium. A big chunk of the helium that goes into making all the AI chips to the regular chips at TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, at SK Hynix, the biggest memory producer in South Korea, Samsung, etc. One of the biggest key elements we need is helium. And as an element, one of the two basic elements after hydrogen. And that is a byproduct of oil and natural gas processes in the Middle East. It comes from there. That was stopped. Today, the facilities that created them were damaged, 20-30% of the capacity. And that, according to the authorities, could take years to replace. So news for tech AI, even though we have a ceasefire, good news, I like it, is that bad news. It'll take a while to bring the supply back on. And so all the inputs that are supply constrained, power, memory, people around AI, all of that, add helium to the list. And I'm glad there's a ceasefire. I hope it turns into a permanent one and there is no more bombings anywhere and no civilization threats. But from a helium point of view, from a tech point of view, expect supply shortages and not for a little bit. So that would be my answer on that question. So I hope all of that is useful. I want to thank you again for joining us on this episode 50 new experiment. I'm open to suggestions, welcome on features, what to do, what not to do, etc. And as usual, would appreciate any likes and subscribes because it helps on the algorithms. Again, you can find this on YouTube, AI Ramblings. You can also find it at my Substack, michaelparekh.substack.com, or just Google AI-RTZ, and you'll find the Substack, and you can subscribe for free, all of it. Thank you, and stay tuned.